All right. All right. Welcome, everybody. It's Monday morning, the third day of November, 2025. You are listening to Global Affairs Unfiltered with me, Jack Stockwell. Welcome to the program this morning. That will be much of an update of what's been happening that will immediately affect the next few weeks of your life, to say the least. I'm trying to arrange to have Harley on here tomorrow. If I can figure out how best to make the connection work. It didn't work last time. So I will try to do what I can to get the connection to work, because he's been doing a lot of research into Epstein and what is really the story behind the Epstein issue. Not necessarily what you've heard in the news, but what's really going on behind it in the sense of deep state and world control. All right, we'll try and do that for tomorrow. Also, we are coming into the holiday time of the year. And as such, we always have this special that we run from Black Friday through the end of December, where I will take care of 2 new people for the price of 1. We decided to go ahead and do that now. So as of today, the third day of November, run until December 31st, and it needs to be completed by December 31st, I will take care of 2 new patients for the price of 1. That is one heck of a savings. So, and who would be benefited by that? Oh my goodness. The kinds of cases that I see when I'm dealing with the brainstem. Everything from serious mental problems, migraines, headaches, neck pain, stiffness, shoulder problems, upper back, lower back, sciatica, hip, knee, as well as internal system problems, all that is controlled by the central nervous system. That's the kind of stuff I see. And I am willing to cut it, essentially cutting the fee in half. I'll take care of 2 people for the price of 1, and they do not have to be there at the same time. They really need to be scheduled at the same time, but not to come in the clinic. The scheduling needs to take place with the front staff at the same time, preferably. But they don't have to be the care doesn't have to be administered at the same time. So the office number 801-523-1890. Now's a good, I know people wait for this special. Even though they've been in pain all year, they wait for the special. Well, the special is on now, as of this morning. All right, is an invasion of Venezuela underway? Now, again, you have learned, as I have learned, anything that's big in the news is the subterfuge. It's the cover, it's the cloud, it's the smoke to cover up what is really going on behind the scenes. And this big thing about Venezuela is not completely, it doesn't begin and end with Venezuela. I mean, according to Gateway Pundit, there was an interesting comment in there. An Atlas Intel and Bloomberg poll shows that 53% of everyone in Latin America supports a military regime change intervention in Venezuela. And they said this: in the last days, the White House has consistently denied reports that the decision to strike Venezuelan targets connected to drug trafficking has been made, but point out that the USS Iwo Jima and the USS Gravely are within striking distance of that country. This is after the United States, by its own admission, has lawlessly murdered 63 individuals who are alleged to have been seeking to transport illicit drugs to the United States. And I would like to add my opinion to that as well, that we are definitely guilty of committing murder on the high seas. And because these ships were not boarded, they were not apprehended, they were not boarded, they were not searched. We're just told that that's what's going on, but that's another story. In an interview with Danny Davis, recorded on the 1st of November, former CIA analyst Larry Johnson, who, if you are familiar with Judge Napolitano's podcast, you know who Larry Johnson is. He He's fascinating to listen to. And there's one thing about, there's a big difference between working for the CIA and being a field agent and being a CIA analyst who sits there at the top of all the work of field agents in that particular area, who knows much, much more of what's going on and how the system works. Well, Larry Johnson pointed out that the first of the 60-foot, he called it the 60-foot cigarette boat that was blown up, presuming the video footage was not AI, and we don't know, had only 4 outboard motors propelling it. He said the amount of fuel those motors would consume in the long trip to Florida could not possibly be carried in such a vessel. He said there's no gas stations out there in the ocean. And in an October 29th, this is last Wednesday, interview with Tucker Carlson, Douglas McGregor, who's another regular on the Napolitano show, reported that he had just recently been in Washington, D.C., speaking with individuals who are, he said, just below the decision-making level, who explained that the purpose of targeting Venezuela has nothing to do with drugs or oil, but flipping the chessboard on Russia and China. And according to this is, and I'm of this particular persuasion myself, because according to McGregor, he said, don't you understand? By going to Venezuela, we're saying a very strong message because Russia and China have tried to build up and cultivate support there. And we simply are telling them that they cannot do it. We're flipping the chessboard, said McGregor. So McGregor had pointed out earlier in an interview that Trump wasn't getting a clear win in the Middle East or Ukraine, Russia, and that he wants a win. And that in order to appear strong, which he mistakenly believes he's going to get by bombing Venezuela and Colombia, McGregor was well aware that Maduro had already made a generous proffer to the Trump administration for development of Venezuela's petroleum reserves, which he, were he in the Trump administration, would urge the president to accept. McGregor also said that Maduro is not soft on narco-terrorists and that deposing him would actually increase narco-terrorism, not to mention the quagmire that's awaiting the United States military if we are absolutely stupidly foolish enough to send troops into Venezuela. So did you get that? I had to go through my sources 2 or 3 different times on this so that it was clear in my mind. This it is. I've said all along, it's about getting control of their oil and their gas and taking it from them. But after reading and studying from different sources that I really like, it's becoming more evident that what's going on here is that with the continued effort of Russia and of China to get a foothold in this hemisphere, in Central America as well as South America, what this thing is going to do here in the overturning of the government that has been friendly with China and Russia is to get Russia and China out of this hemisphere. And so it's really not so much an attack against narco-terrorism as it is against the foreign policies of Russia and China regarding this hemisphere, which I thought was kind of interesting. Also, Tulsi Gabbard, you haven't heard much from her, have you? She says the U.S. no longer commits regime change. I thought that was an interesting thing to say because that's been our foreign policy since I was born. Now, apparently, this incongruity, apparent incongruity, with the recent bombing of Iran for regime change, and the threats to invade Venezuela for regime change, President Trump, as defended by Tulsi Gabbard in a presentation that she was making at the Manama Dialogue 2025 in Bahrain just Friday. Some of her statements are most welcome, but often appear to contradict what Trump is really saying and doing. She called this, quote, a pivotal time in history at which we must recall that the true security, true stability, and peace cannot be forged in isolation, but in the common collection of peacemakers working towards that common purpose. So regarding Trump, she said, as someone who serves under President Trump's leadership, I have experienced the promise of peace. His vision is about delivering real wins, not just for America, but for our collective cause of peace and prosperity, and doing so through a very principled realism rooted in shared goals, interests, and values. And then on regime change, she said, the old Washington way of thinking is something we hope is in the rearview mirror and something that has held us back for too long. For decades, our foreign policy has been trapped in a counterproductive and endless cycle of regime change or nation building. It was a one-size-fits-all approach of toppling regimes, trying to impose our system of governments on others, intervening in conflicts that were barely understood, and walking away with more enemies than allies. Boy, that's a nice confession. The result, trillions spent, countless lives lost, and in many cases, a creation of greater security threats and the rise of Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS. Then she credits Trump with this view. She said, this is what President Trump's America First policy looks like in action, building peace through diplomacy, with an understanding that there cannot be prosperity without peace. President Trump de-escalated tensions on the Korean Peninsula through direct talks. During his first term in office, he opened lines of communication with North Korea that had been frozen for generations. He did what no other president has been willing to do, engage directly to speak about peace. He restored American leadership abroad. He brokered economic normalization between Serbia and Kosovo, promoting stability and peace in the Balkan region. Well, this is really a rah-rah speech, isn't it? Then she said, and now, just 9 months into his second term, President Trump's America First agenda is supercharging these efforts and securing peace on a scale between India and Pakistan, Israel and Iran, a peace agreement between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Cambodia and Thailand, averted conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. As was mentioned previously and is very much in focus to many of us, he negotiated the release of all living hostages from Hamas. While fragile and historic ceasefire and peace plan is moving forward, it is doing so with integral support from many of our partners here in this room. So what ties us all together? A simple revolutionary idea: pursue joint interests. Well, where have you heard that before? Find those win-win solutions where they align and recognize that, yes, we have differences, but we'll work through them. President Trump, her quote continues here. President Trump understands that not everyone shares our exact values or our system of governance. And that's okay. What's most important is finding where our shared common ground exists and building those partnerships and progressing on those common grounds. Things like energy independence that stabilizes global markets. You'd have to ask, though, does this fit with Trump's massive sanctions so long, or on countries of oil countries like Russia? Anyway, things like countering terrorism, something that continues to grow in different parts of the world. Anyway, she concludes again with assigning to Trump ideas and policies which sound an awful lot more like her own, which we can only hope Trump is or will follow. Under President Trump, she said, the United States is your partner in executing this vision as a deal maker who is committed to peace, and together we look forward to continuing this path towards peace, to ending wars that have defined too many generations, unlocking prosperity for millions, and helping support the future of a Middle East where security is a dividend of cooperation, not a cost of conflict. Just Tulsi. Tulsi. All right, now to show you the craziness. to show you the craziness of British thinking. This just came out in The Economist last Thursday. What you know is the British version of U.S. News World Report, or the other way around. But The Economist, in what appears to be an unsigned editorial, said this: why funding Ukraine is a giant opportunity for Europe. The bill will be huge, but a historic bargain. Now, after you review all the reasons why Ukraine is losing the war and why Europe is collapsing and bankrupt, it argues that this is a great opportunity with two needed results. First, and I'm quoting directly from The Economist, first, we can bankrupt and destroy Russia. The first is a financial commitment that can expose and amplify the Kremlin's long-term weakness. Russia has lost the lives of 200 to 500,000 troops. Double the figure for Ukraine. It's also bearing a heavy financial burden on its own. Now, I might add here, the best intelligence I've seen yet out of all of this is that after 3.5 years of war, almost 4 now, Russia may have lost as much as 100,000 troops. But here, the Telegraph, the Economist is saying it could be as much as 500,000. Of all the intelligence gathering I've been able to put together, nobody agrees with that except the Western press. But it says it's also declared defense spending will hit 160 billion in 225. And the state-run banks have also engaged in an immense off-budget lending spree to support the military-industrial complex. It is true that sanctions in 2022 failed to bring Russia to its knees as some had hoped, but Mr. Putin's initial war boom has now given way to stagflation, with growth at almost zero, labor shortages, hidden bad debts, inflation of 8%, and interest rates of 16%. Another half-decade of this would probably trigger an economic and banking crisis in Russia, and if Europe can demonstrate to Russia that it will underwrite the war for at least that long, Mr. Putin will be cornered. What fantasy. All right, it goes on here. Secondly, get rid of the Americans. Europe's second prize would be to become less dependent on America militarily, a necessity given Mr. Trump's wobbly commitment to NATO. Any long-term financing solution for Ukraine would help Europe build the financial and industrial muscle it needs to defend itself. Well, there it is. After 6 more years of war it will take to destroy Russia and get rid of the U.S. influence over Europe. Brilliant, just absolutely brilliant British reasoning. I mean, after all, for the European Union to issue bonds collectively would create a bigger pool of common debt, deepening Europe's single capital market and boosting the role of the euro as the reserve currency. And as for the cost, that would be difficult but worth it, they said. The 4-year commitment would cost $390 billion, composed almost entirely of donated weapons and cash to finance Ukraine's budget deficits. This is a lot, but still excellent value spread across the economic resources of all NATO members, not counting America. The bill for Ukraine is affordable, with annual costs rising from 0.2% of GDP last year to 0.4% of GDP. What can you say to that? I mean, such mythical nonsense. Just at the time, see, this stuff is coming out just at the time that Russia has released the new weapons. And I think President Trump was given some really bad information about that, because I think what he was told, and I might be wrong, is that this new nuclear-powered cruise missile, the Brezhnev, is carrying a nuclear warhead. Well, it isn't. Russia was very clear on that. But we don't have anything like this. We don't have any kind of weaponry, anything like this, that can just stay up there. It doesn't, it talks about its range being 14,000 miles. That means on a direct target, it can hit something 14,000 kilometers, not miles, about 10,000 miles away. From any launch point, and then it's not just, my goodness, what's going on? It sounds pretty serious. I don't know if you can hear that, just lots of sirens in the background. I'll get to the weapons here in a few minutes. It's just that Hegseth claims the U.S. is now moving quickly to restart nuclear testing. Because I said, this is, I think, the bad news that President Trump got. That he was told by whoever, and you know the White House is full of neocons. One of the preeminent ones is Rubio, of course, the Secretary of State, the ultimate fox in the henhouse. And they're telling the president these things are nuclear arms. So he says, all right, we got to get back in there and start some testing. So Hegseth on Saturday claimed that the Pentagon is moving quickly on President Donald Trump's directive to restart nuclear weapons testing to ensure the U.S. has the most capable nuclear arsenal in the world. And you heard if you watched the interview the other day, he said that we have the greatest number of nuclear weapons. That's not true. Now, he said that, he lied. I mean, if he doesn't know the truth, then he lied. Well, that sounded kind of silly, didn't it? The truth is, of course, Russia has far more nuclear weapons and far more deployable weapons than we do. Now, there's a couple areas of nukes where we're kind of on par with one another. But for the most part, Russia has far more nuclear weapons than we do. But they have delivery systems now. The Brezhnev and the Oreshnik missiles that we can't do anything to stop these things because of their speed. Now, all ballistic missiles have tremendous speed to them. All of them do. But a lot of them, most of them, are not maneuverable, like these new Russian units. Anyway, Hegseth said last Friday in a meeting with the Secretary General Cao Kim Hoon of the Southeast Asian nations that the Department of Defense is going to work with the Department of Energy on nuclear testing, and added that Trump has been very clear that the U.S. needs to have a credible nuclear deterrent. Well, we already do. Even though our weapons are not as sophisticated as Russian weapons, there's nothing wrong with the ability of the American nuclear weaponry to destroy all life on this planet, single-handedly. Anyway, this is Hegseth said, this is the baseline of our deterrence. And so having understanding and resulting testing is pretty responsible, very responsible way to do that. I think it makes nuclear conflict less likely if you know what you have and make sure it operates properly. So it's the right directive. We're moving out quickly. America will ensure that we have the strongest, most capable nuclear arsenal and that we can maintain peace through strength. Well, still not explained as what requirements and objectives are to be met by the resumption of testing. Nor has any case been made that there are requirements and objectives that can only be met by nuclear explosive testing, either above or underground. And that the arsenal is aging is used, by the proponents of testing as a justification, but the National Nuclear Security Administration says which is the agency responsible for manufacturing and maintaining nuclear warheads, has or has had 5 programs to refurbish the existing warheads, all being accomplished without nuclear explosive testing. Now, Jackie Rosen, a Nevada Democrat, told Politico this in an interview. There's no damn reason on the face of the earth to start explosive testing again. We'll do everything we can to stop it. And Rosen's opposition stems in part from the legacy of nearly 50 years of testing in Nevada. From 1945, do you know what year we stopped nuclear testing in Nevada? Your little trivia question of the morning. Because, I mean, this is surprising. This is surprising to me that we were still doing nuclear explosive testing up until 1992. She says it'll kill and poison your own people and begin a chain of events that could lead us to World War III. So Trump himself refused to clarify the matter when he was asked on last Friday, while on his way to Palm Beach, whether the U.S. would be conducting nuclear explosive testing. He said, "You'll find out very soon, but we're going to be doing some testing. Other countries do it. If they're going to do it, we're going to do it too." Ugh. All right. Vice Admiral Richard Carell, a U.S. President Donald Trump's nominee to replace General Anthony Cotton as commander of U.S. Strategic Command, punted when he was asked about Trump's order during his confirmation hearing on October 30th. He said, "Neither China nor Russia has conducted a nuclear explosive test, so I'm not reading anything into or reading anything out." Carell said existing simulations for nuclear detonations are sufficient to ensure Stratcom's annual certification that the nuclear arsenal is reliable, effective, and credible. So Carell said that he had no such hesitation about endorsing his predecessor's call for purchasing more B-21 stealth bombers, and that the 100 aircraft that the program of record calls for, however, he said, "I agree with General Cotton's assessment, and I believe he's been on the record saying between 140 and 150 B-21s." Adding that the B-21 is one of the strongest performing large acquisition programs we have, and I agree it's on time and on budget. All right, now I want to get to kind of a well, I want to talk about the Russian system, because the Russians are now saying, and if you're just tuning in, I want to mention something that I said there at the very beginning of the program. Our annual 2-for-1 NUCA, the package that I use to get people out of pain and suffering. We usually would do 2 patients for the price of 1 from Black Friday through Christmas. We're starting it this week. I'm going to start it this week. 2 for the price of 1. Again, you don't have to be there at the same time like before. But it would be good if both of the appointments were scheduled very close somewhat together. Not absolutely necessary, but it just makes it more convenient on our end. But I will do, I mean, that's cutting it in half. Cutting it in half from now till the end of the year. 2 for the price of 1. 801-523-1890 and at jackstockwell.com, as well as forbiddendoctor.com, there should be some links to schedule a free consultation. Even though the price is cut in half, the free consultation, of course, is still there, where we sit and talk for a half an hour. And if it looks like I can help you and you want me to, fine. If you don't, we'll still be friends. All right, so Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova told a press conference on Thursday that the new Burevestnik cruise missile and the Poseidon torpedo weapon systems, both powered by a tiny nuclear reactor, were needed to respond to NATO's increasingly destabilizing actions in the area of missile defense. Now, I have been, probably some of you figured this out. I have been trying to figure out on a cruise missile design, how you have a nuclear power plant, and Putin said the nuclear power plant that is in the Burevestnik missile is 1,000th the size of a nuclear power plant inside a nuclear powered Russian submarine, 1,000 times smaller. Now, in nuclear powered submarines, whether it's Russian or American, it works on somewhat the same concept as a nuclear power plant that's generating electrical energy. You have extremely hot source of heat, which comes from the nuclear fuel, that turns water into steam to drive turbines that create electrical power, but also the propeller of the submarine. And as long as the nuclear fuel is there, which could go on in perpetuity, and the water systems are contained, you limitless fuel. But how do you do that in a missile that has these hyper speeds? Mach 10 and up to Mach 20. There's a point in the Oreshnik, the one that blew up, they used a couple of years ago. When it reaches the apex and starts down, it generates speeds of 20 times the speed of sound. Well, there's gravity involved with that, as well as its own fuel system, which is not nuclear. But in a cruise missile, what is coming out the back end of that missile to propel it at such a high speed? I haven't figured that out yet. Anyway, the Russians are trying to explain their new weapon systems that they say is going to absolutely shift the global balance of power into the Russian hands, because nobody else has anything like this. And there are still people in the American government who deny they even exist. They deny they exist. These weapons exist only in the fanciful imaginations of Russian dictators, even though they've been demonstrated. Now, what makes the Poseidon, the Burevestnik, one of these, but what makes the Poseidon, this nuclear-powered torpedo, unique is that it represents a completely new generation of these nuclear weaponry devices, because it's powered by a nuclear reactor. And now I can understand how it could have endless fuel because it's in a sea of water. And that water can be recycled to create the steam to power the submarine or the torpedo. Actually, it's more like a small submarine. And powered by it, it can operate at depths indefinitely, reach virtually any point on the world's oceans, which makes the Poseidon almost invulnerable to existing missile defense systems and opens up entirely new possibilities for strategic deterrence, because both systems have definitely changed the existing balance of power. And this Russian pundit that I was reading believes, referring to an unusual silence in the West, has yet to comment on Russia's progress in the sense of nuclear-powered weaponry. It's just, how do you handle objections? How do you handle objections for which you have no answer? It's just usually silence, isn't it? You just kind of shut up. All right, leading the charge was the Miami Herald, which announced this Friday morning, the 31st, quote, the Trump administration has made the decision to attack military installations inside Venezuela, and the strikes can come at any moment. And it cited, quote, sources with knowledge of the situation. As to the basis of its story, that targets could be struck by air in a matter of days or even hours. And the Miami Herald story referenced this article published by the Wall Street Journal, outlining the similar targets. The Miami Herald updated its story midday to include White House Deputy Press Secretary Anna Kelly's statement that the Herald's unnamed sources don't know what they're talking about. Any announcements regarding Venezuela policy will come directly from the president. Then a few hours later, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, commenting on X about the same story, said, your sources claiming to have knowledge of the matter tricked you into writing a fake story. And then President Trump himself told reporters, no, that's not true. There's no imminent attack. And so some observers think the links, followed by denials, are just part of Washington's strategy to rattle the cage in Venezuela. So ABC News reported the Trump administration has drawn up a secret list of targets in Venezuela the U.S. could strike upon orders of the president. Here we go, attacking a sovereign nation who's no threat to us, every bit as much as the lead up to the war in Iraq, every bit as much as the lead up to the war in Afghanistan, every bit as much as the lead up to the Vietnam War. One fake story after another fake story, and then all of a sudden body bags are coming to Dover Air Force Base with American service people in it. So everyone going through all these different stories and the stuff that Maduro is saying and the Venezuelan government is saying, and apparently the Miami Herald is saying, everyone's side had agreed that it would be difficult to repeat George H.W. Bush's 1990 all-out invasion of Panama to take down Manuel Noriega in the case of Venezuela, much less a prolonged occupation. They said the invasion of Panama, a country of some 3 million people at the time, required 30,000 American troops. Venezuela is a far greater territory with a population of more than 28 million. Nonetheless, the consensus of the experts cited by U.S. war-run media is that the Venezuelan regime can and will be brought down by the combination of a U.S. show of military power, build up off its coasts combined with targeted airstrikes, and perhaps some deployment of U.S. special forces. Just one more piece of the cake, war. Well, how many troops are going to land there this week? Or how much of this is just more Trump showmanship to get Russia and China's attention that they do not belong in this hemisphere? The old Monroe Doctrine. And I've heard people talking about seeking monsters, foreign policy, going out and seeking monsters for U.S.-backed regime change. This is the very thing that John Quincy Adams, the son of President John Adams, I think was he the sixth president? Or no, there was President Washington, then Jefferson, then Adams, then Monroe, and then I think John Quincy. That'd make him about 5, if I've got that right. I might be wrong. But John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, was the one who was famous for, it's not the policy of the United States to go around looking for monsters to destroy on this planet. We have plenty to do here to build this country and to take care of our own people. We don't need to be doing that. All right. So, I mean, the overall picture of the world is both very challenging and frightening and hopeful all at the same time. And the danger of nuclear annihilation still hangs over us like the sword of Damocles. But there's rays of hope on the horizon that there is a pathway to avoid this kind of a tragedy. So first was the summit which just took place between President Trump and Xi Jinping in South Korea. And that was on a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10, according to President Trump, which means he thought it had a very positive outcome. I think it calmed down the situation in terms of the trade war, because it looks like they both backed down a little bit and restarted some direct communication between the presidents of the two strongest economies in the world. And that is for sure positive. And I think it did not at all eliminate the underlying tensions. I mean, that's one thing. President Trump then responded to what he thought was an announcement of the resumption of nuclear testing by Russia. But what it actually referred to was the test of the Russian, as I said, supersonic cruise missile, the Burevestnik, which is fueled by a nuclear reactor, can fly at hypersonic speeds for a long time, and is maneuverable, and therefore unmatched by any other missile in the Western side, because it can fly very low below radar, controlled by Russian satellites. And what was tested was the missile, but without a nuclear warhead. But apparently Trump mistook that and said that the United States is now going to resume nuclear testing as well. Whereupon the Russian government spokesperson, Peskov, said that he hoped that President Trump had been informed in the proper way about the test of the Burevestnik cruise missile and that the Poseidon underwater missile, neither of which were nuclear tests, which kind of shows you how fragile this whole situation is. Now, I think that the main advantage of the Burevestnik, according to Putin, and I'm not going to go into length about it, because there's a lot more qualified people out there talking about this in podcasts, a reliably good podcast, especially Judge Napolitano's. And I was listening to Ray McGovern the other day in fact, it may have been yesterday, just to point out the fact that according to Putin, this missile is fueled by a very small nuclear reactor, as I said, which according to Putin is 1,000 times smaller than that which is powering their submarines. So it is for sure a major technological breakthrough, but does it shift the strategic balance together with the Oreshnik? Now, does that deter madness on the side of the European Union members? I mean, for example, the recent most incredibly dangerous, stupid, nonsense, irresponsible statement that came from the Belgian Defense Minister, Theo Franken, who, when asked in an interview if the delivery of the Tomahawk missiles to the Ukraine would not risk an all-out war between NATO and Russia, said this. He says, "That doesn't concern me because Moscow will be wiped off the map." And he's the defense minister. Now, on the question of whether there was a danger of a conventional attack on Brussels, he said this would result in Moscow being flattened. To which the deputy foreign minister of Russia, Alexander Grushko, absolutely denounced such irresponsible rhetoric, correctly named an atmosphere of military psychosis in Europe. But then there's this ongoing debate on militarization and buildup in Europe. The atmosphere is psychotic. I can only confirm that. Not being a licensed psychosis therapist, what I understand of psychosis, that sounds psychotic to me. And so it's no surprise that the program director of the Valdai Club, Timofey Bordachev, responded to the demand of certain European countries to rearm themselves. Rearm, rearm, the Russians are coming with nuclear weapons, like, for example, Germany. And he said that this is a nuclear illusion of a collapsing Western Europe. I mean, what are they reaching for now that they have nothing else to use? They're bankrupt. They're being deindustrialized, especially Germany. The two cities, I got to think of Wolfsburg and Braunschweig. Wolfsburg and Braunschweig. The two great, well, they're like Detroit, Michigan, of Germany. It's where the VW is manufactured and the Mercedes is manufactured. And the German press is saying there is shortly to come massive layoffs of the workers who build the VW vehicles and the Mercedes vehicles. So in the midst of this, they're talking about nuclear arming Germany. Now, the Western European leaders do not qualify to control nuclear weapons. You know, France and Britain have them. And then he spoke directly of the third phase. This program director of the Valdai Club, to which I have, Putin spoke there a couple of times recently, and I have quoted him on my show. Seems like a rather sensible intelligence group. He spoke correctly of the third phase of the long decline of Europe, which started in 1914 with World War I. And then after the complete loss of sovereignty to the United States, after the defeat of the Second World War, and now the third phase, meaning Germany. And he says the decline in Europe is breathtaking. You right now have beginning to show in a most dramatic way that the entire bottom of German industry is falling out. The job centers of northern Germany announced, as I said, the expected mass layoffs in Wolfsburg and Braunschweig, and that there are cities which are the center of auto industry collapsing. And now it's really coming to a big time, and the present European leadership is doing absolutely nothing to reverse this, but to talk war with Russia. Russia must be destroyed. We must have nuclear weapons here in Germany. Russia must be destroyed. Now, if that was not enough, the underlying financial disorder for the whole planet, as well as our country, is much worse. I can only point to an article by Professor Hilary Allen from the American University Washington College of Law, who's also an author of many books concerning the financial system. She predicts a soon-to-happen crash of artificial intelligence, followed by a crash and a wave of defaults in the cryptocurrency markets, and a crash of government bonds. So it really looks like the crash of the everything bubble is finally coming very close. The other unfortunate aspect of Americans' policy, which I've mentioned several times now, just this morning, is this almost certain invasion of Venezuela. Have we learned nothing from Vietnam? I've never been to Venezuela, I've never been to Vietnam, but I'll tell you, the countries look very similar as far as vegetation and mountainous jungles look. A land invasion in which the pretext is the government of Maduro would be collaborating with drug cartels, and because we have designated drug cartels as terrorist organizations, therefore we can go after them anywhere we want, and Maduro is sitting there atop of a narco-terrorist group itself, which makes Maduro a terrorist, which under our doctrine of terrorism, we can go after him, you know, kind of like Hussein and Gaddafi. Well, already 50 people have been killed in illegal killings, just claiming these drug boats our drug boats without any due process or proof. And it's claiming that these, it really reminds you of the insistence that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction in 2003, when everybody knew at the time it was a lie. Likewise, everybody knows and sees that the accusations of collaboration with the drug cartels is just a pretext for regime change in Venezuela to access the rich raw materials and energy resources of Venezuela. And it could lead to an explosion in all of Latin America if this happens. It could be just one step too far. Because China and Russia are involved in more areas than just Venezuela as far as South America is concerned. So I want to emphasize a statement. How much time we got left here? I want to emphasize a statement by Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, who had announced an anti-war campaign in all Hungarian cities to oppose the bellicose policies of the European Union. It's supposed to start here in a couple of weeks on November 15th in the Hungarian city of Győr, and it'll be followed by rallies in many other cities, where he wants to get 1 million people in the streets in areas between Bratislava and Budapest, protesting European policies regarding war against Russia. I think that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. And then naturally, the situation in Gaza remains one of absolute horror. The ceasefire obviously does not hold. The killings continue. They're also, I just think that it's quite significant that the Elders, which is an organization founded by Nelson Mandela, consists mainly of former heads of state. They've made an urgent call to release the Palestinian leader, Marwan Barghouti, who's been in, 20 years now or something like that in an Israeli prison, because his release would be a big step towards the two-state solution for Gaza and Palestine, which obviously should be fully supported. But we know that Netanyahu does not want a two-state solution. In fact, he will continue fighting until the end, and that's why you've got all of these violations of the ceasefire going on both sides. They did it first. No, well, they did it first. No, they did it first. No, they did it first. Well, from the very beginning, we know that the ceasefire wasn't going to work. The ceasefire was intended to last long enough to get the living hostages out of there. It helped Netanyahu save face. It got the innocent people out of Hamas control. There was like almost a 50-to-1 ratio of people released from Israeli prisons for the number of people that were released by Hamas. So both sides had a field day in what they were getting back. The rest of the hostages held by Hamas, I think, are more being held by gravity inside of these collapsed buildings, for which these people have long dried up. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to consider what is taking place there. Now, I want to go out of the program. We've got about 5 minutes. About Trump's nuke testing is just a very crude reaction. I mean, I'm always trying to look at what's going on behind the scenes. I'm always trying to, why did he say this? Why are they doing this? And to take a step back and look at a wider view, and take a step back and look at a wider view, and then bring into the picture a lot of things that aren't being discussed in the daily news, but are being kicked around by international news pundits that might be the real reason of what's going on. And so Russia's successful testing of these two breakthrough nuclear-capable weapons, the Burevestnik and the Poseidon, marks an absolute technological besting over the United States which is why President Trump overreacted with warnings of renewed nuke testing. But the weapons unveiled by the Russians shift the strategic nuclear balance decisively. I heard it expressed this way. In chess terms, they are tantamount to checkmate. So while President Trump in his first term stopped a lot of the nuclear limitation stuff, I don't know what we've done in response to that, because I haven't seen reliable testing on the part of U.S. weaponry developed during that period of time. But we've seen the Russian development. And when you have an unmanned submarine vehicle capable of 1,000-kilometer range, unmanned, capable of just sitting somewhere until it's told to do something, and you have this missile, this supersonic cruise missile. I mean, these weapons can circumnavigate the globe indefinitely and strike at targets from multiple unknown directions. Now, you imagine Putin and Trump sitting down at a table looking at each other, and Putin in his, I don't want to say inimical, that's not the right way, but in his own personal, passive-looking manner, checkmate, Donald, checkmate. We have these in several places. You can't find them, you can't see them, you can't track them. And all they need is the click switch to go. So some of the best experts I've heard on the American side is that maybe a year from now, we might have a hypersonic cruise missile. Right now, only the Russians do. Which actually gives me a little hope. I find some peace in that, because I don't think the Russians are going to use them. Only, as they've said, in defense of the motherland. All right, I'm going to try and get Harley on here with me tomorrow. Again, in my clinic, as of today, we're going to start our Christmas special of 2 new patients for the price of 1, starting today. You can call the office 801-523-1890. I know many people wait for this because every year the schedule fills up with people who want to save a lot of money by coming in at half price. And this is for NUCA audience only. I get a lot of people from referrals from different areas, but this is for the NUCA. This is for the K-Talk audience, because it was a K-Talk audience 31 years ago that started building my practice. Today, it'll be somewhere between 22,000, 23,000 people that I've seen. Well, it's just a way of saying thank you. 2 new people for the price of 1. 801-523-1890. I'm going to be going back to the previous broadcast here in a minute, as soon as the top of the hour arrives. It's a pleasure that I do not take lightly of being able to be a part of the regular broadcast at K-Talk. So this is K-Talk, AM 1640, Sandy, Salt Lake, and back to the regular programming, and I will see you tomorrow, hopefully with Harley Schlanger. And for those on the stream, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot for being a part of this. If you can like and recommend or refer, whatever you say, it'll help to build the audience. I will see you all tomorrow as well. Be safe out there and keep your wits about you. And keep studying. keep reading, own these principles.